Hi, it's Elisabeth Hancock, host of the Great Awakening podcast. So this week, I thought we would take a look at consciousness, plasma consciousness, and how that links with our human DNA. And it's just something that I've been thinking about over the past week. And I will upload the YouTube video on natural law, but I just wanted to discuss this because it leads on from where we've been going the past couple of weeks with the Numu from the Pleiades, the self-fertilizing Lebe, and the jackal or the Anunnaki, and how the Numu basically were the Anunnaki, but how something seemed to happen. And this is because there's a lot of talk about what UFOs and ETs and all these sorts of things are. So it looks like we're gearing up for disclosure, but I keep asking myself, disclosure on what exactly? Because one of the things that I can see from all the different areas in our world, that everything has been manipulated. There are rabbit holes and gatekeepers in every single area. So New Age spirituality is a massive rabbit hole, lots of gatekeepers in there. The UFO industry, the ET industry, all these different things, they're massively manipulated. And because we're dealing with the mind, and the secret space programs in particular show us that the mind is a multidimensional place and, can be accessed by other beings, if you like, it puts a different spin, I think, on what exactly UFOs and ETs are. But let's start with consciousness. So last week I was interviewed by Sacha Stone for his Lazarus initiative, and that was broadcast on Friday. If you're part of his membership, you can take a look at that in there. But he mentioned that he worked with a team of scientists who explored all four states of the Earth: round, flat, toroidal, and ellipsoidal. And they concluded that all four of them could be scientifically proven. So what does that tell us? Well, as you know, I talk a lot on here about how it's also been proven that human consciousness creates reality. And essentially what we believe is what we get. So maybe the Earth is what we believe it is. And I do feel that there's an element of that. Our human consciousness is broadcasting, or our mind is broadcasting onto the field of consciousness and essentially shifting reality into different timelines, into different times and space. The way we use the term time and space, or space and time, I think shows us that what we think is space is not, and what we think is time is not as well. But there are also quantum physicists that not only believe that the Earth is a living being, but they're also now saying that the entire solar system is a living being. So this, I think, really expands our consciousness and breaks us out of that limitation of what the solar system is, what Earth is, what the planets are. And for me, I rather like the way quantum physics expands our consciousness in that way. It's a growing field, I can see that. So there are quantum physicists who also believe that the sun is a living being as well, but is a binary sun. And everything in this world that we live in is binary, but also that the sun is a portal, and many of the planets, or what we call planets in this solar system, are also portals. In the spiritual fields and fields of yoga and different energy modalities, humans are also said to be portals, again linking us to different times and space, and once again thinking, well, what is time and space? And according to remote viewer John Vivanco, and I talk about this in my second book, he talks about how human DNA is more akin to portal travel than long distance travel, which tells me that we don't travel long distance through space, because there is no long distance through space. We travel through portals through space, or portals in the universe. So if our DNA is able to travel through dimensions in the universe, then what does that make our body? And we'll come back to that in a minute. But first, let's have a quick look at time. So we've got space and time. We understand that space is the physical representation of what we call the universe, which is more of a spiritual thing, or other dimensional things, spiritual energies, as we talked about last week. But I think time is not what we think it is either, or not what we've been told it is. And quantum physicist Richard Alan Miller believes that time in our world is a construct. And I am beginning to feel that he is right with this. And the reason I think he's right is because if we take time out of everything, not only does the world make more sense, but time is trapping us into a very limited, tight box, if you like, into a one-dimensional linear thinking. And as I've been researching times and dates and various things of when different things happened in our world, it did get me thinking that, well, what is time? What is time exactly? If space isn't what we believe it is, then time possibly isn't either. And time and space, we can travel through both of them using our consciousness, using our mind on the field of consciousness. Richard Alan Miller also believes that consciousness is a dream state, and it's not actually real. It's a dream within a dream. And I can actually understand what he means by this. And that's because I work with energy and consciousness all the time. Remote viewing, astral travel, meditation or deep meditation. And when you go into that inner world, it does feel like it's real. So what exactly is that inner world? This dream state mirrors the Indian Vedas, which talk of the Maya, the illusion, and the Aborigines' dream state, of course. And I always feel like the indigenous people know the truth because they've been around for such a long time. But they talk in metaphor, in stories, in song, not in linear time or thinking. For example, the Aborigines call a tree a treeing because it's not a fixed state. And this shows us that this world is not fixed either. But time actually traps us into a fixed world, into a fixed belief. I do feel that the universe is alive, but what we understand the universe is made up of is consciousness. So is consciousness alive? The animists, the Celts, they all talk about everything being alive, everything having a soul. So if we think about the earth being a living being, the sun being a living being, the planets being living beings, the solar system being a living being, and the universe itself being a living being, that means that everything is alive. But that doesn't mean that we cannot come up with scientific terms to explain consciousness, to explain cloud shapes that look like this, to explain these dragon energy shapes that look like this, or maybe to explain how they created these cymatic shapes, these windows in the cathedrals, which exhibit the same frequency that the cymatic shape is coming up with. Also explaining these different beings, these different light beings, that when we're doing deep meditations, we often see these sorts of beings in our mind sight. We're now calling these different things ETs, extraterrestrials, but I think many of us now can feel that it's not extraterrestrial, it's interdimensional, transdimensional, multidimensional. And when we go into our own inner world, into our own mind sight, we are connecting with other dimensions that we can sense, that we can sometimes see, we can definitely feel. And where we are now is being led into the trap of materialistic thought, materialistic beliefs, materialistic thinking, that everything is in our external world, but it's actually in our internal world. And this understanding that our inner world can change our external world is something that, as an energy healer, I have noticed in the people I've worked with. I even watched a colleague of mine change the shape of her client's teeth over 6 months, using meditation and visualization and intention, the power of intention. And we also know that thousands of people spontaneously heal every year from chronic disease, even cancer, using energy work, which is really showing us that what we think are physical disorders aren't physical disorders. There's also the yogi that I talk about in my first book, Work Your Energy, whose handprint is in the cave wall in China. And you can still see his handprints there today. I actually tried to get a photo of this, and there is no mention of this on Google anywhere. Literally, you cannot find it. But essentially, you can visit this cave in China, and you can see the handprints actually pushed into the cave. And as he told or explained to his students when he was showing them how he was doing it, he always said that he didn't push, that you can't push your hand into the solid matter, that what you have to do is become the wall. So once he became the wall and merged his consciousness with it, it changed its shape. And that's why many of us are wondering if what the field of consciousness is a field of plasma, which again gives us scientific understanding of how it all works. But as we're right at the beginning of understanding what consciousness is, maybe we don't exactly know what that is yet. 40, 50 years ago, we had the concept of atoms, and now we've moved into quantum and holographic understanding. So we're moving through different scientific understandings very, very fast. And as I've been reading some of these old ET contact books over the past few weeks, I can really see how old and limited the information is now, which for me means that we've moved into a new era, a new way of understanding the world around us, and possibly that is consciousness. Now, the other thing I've noticed, because I teach intuitive development, is the power of the mind. It really is incredibly powerful. And unfortunately, most of us are stuck in very limiting mindsets of not being good enough. It seems to be that this self-doubt is just so ingrained in the human psyche. It's stopping us from accessing the huge amount of power that our minds hold. And maybe this is done on purpose. Maybe we're just not ready to be able to access that power yet. But as we move into this more high vibrational way of approaching life, and I can see myself that the more high vibrational we are as a person, as an individual, the more we start to immediate manifest, which again is showing me that we've had these skills. We had these skills before. Something changed, altered in our world, and we lost those skills, whatever it might be. But I can see that the past 120 years, we have been massively dumbed down. And just like time, the drug industry also trapped us into this fixed thinking, this one-dimensional linear thinking, that we need a drug to heal our disorder. If we understand how new the drug industry, the pharmaceutical industry is. And if we think about the Aborigines talking about a treeing, and talking about the dream state, and we think about how consciousness is a dream within a dream, we can now see how a physical drug tapping into our hormone receptors can really alter the way that we approach reality, the way that we perceive reality. And not only does it trap us into this idea that we are sick and need fixing, but it also traps us into a very one-dimensional state of being. What I really want to try and help people to do, and this is why I do these videos, is to start expanding our consciousness, to understand how unlimited we are as a human, and expand our consciousness, which we can do through research, through meditation, through learning. There are many, many ways to expand it, and expand our consciousness out into what I think I would call galactic consciousness. But I don't think that we know what the galaxy means either. If we get beyond all of our programming, every single shred of programming from this reality, this world that we live in, then maybe we can start to build ourselves back up again. There are many people who believe that our soul or consciousness creates our physical form by essentially projecting our DNA onto our own electromagnetic energy field, which has been tested as stretching up to 9 feet outside of our body. As our DNA changes, our external world changes. So we change from the inside, not the outside. And as I said earlier, thousands of people spontaneously heal every year from chronic disease using this energy work. So is this more proof that our own electromagnetic fields are creating this thing we call life? If changing our external world is done through our inner world, then what does that make our inner world? And what does that make out there? What does that make space rockets, the moon, the sun? If our inner world changes our outer world, what exactly is this external world that we are part of? You see, for me, this explains the concept of shapeshifters that have learned how to harness the power of their mind and consciousness to change their physical form. Everything is a hologram, which makes up this world, and why symbols and sacred geometry can alter the field. And medbed technology shows this is the case too. And this was discovered, or remembered, if you like, by Russian biophysicist and molecular biologist, Dr. Garjajev. And I expect that they had this technology in Atlantis as well. I don't see Atlantis as some sort of mythical island. I see it as explaining how our world was so advanced in the past and how we used to be working with the field of consciousness in a very different way to how we are now. You see here this floating rock. It's literally floating above the ground. This showed that this world works in a very different way to how we believe. We've got this supposedly carved statue here. Interestingly, he's got the Numu serpent legs. How was this carved exactly? It shows that they had advanced technology to be able to do this. We're told that this is marble, but it's completely impossible to carve marble in this way. They must have created this in a different way. And because there are so many thousands of these sorts of statues around the world, stone people, living beings that look like living beings, we have to ask ourselves, if there are so many, then they must have found a way to create these. Or are we looking at living beings that are still existing in one dimension, and what we're seeing is a very fixed one-dimensional linear way of looking at them, which is what time has done to our world. Time has stamped us in to one dimension. And here we have the blemi, which we again talked about last week. So thinking about the blemi, how did these materialize? Who gave birth to the first one? Did we maybe procreate in a different way in the past? Were we more fluid and less fixed? As Edgar Cayce says, as Rudolf Steiner says, as the Aborigines seem to infer as well, we know that there were many, many different beings in our world. The blemi, the dogmen, the giants, the elongated skull people, the mermaids, the serpent people, the lizard people, the greys, many different humanoid beings were in our worlds, and now we only have us. Why is that exactly? Have we been stapled into one dimension, but there are other dimensions still existing in our world, but to us they look fixed, no longer fluid? I have always felt that the human body is very powerful, and I suspect that it's also the epigenetic memories of our past are also switching back on. We've been trapped into a world of materialism where we think everything is outside of ourselves, but this powerful feeling that we feel inside ourselves is telling us that actually everything is inside us. Our chakras, meridian lines, our intentions, vibrational frequency, junk DNA, it's all showing us that we have the same infrastructure as the earth. And we know that the earth is a living being. So what does that make us? Maybe we don't travel through the universe in space rockets. Maybe we actually travel with our own mind. In this field of consciousness, is this what UFOs are doing as well? That the soul or spirit, or whatever we want to call it, the consciousness, the being is projecting their mind onto consciousness and harnessing it for time and space travel. Because we know from the secret space programs that we can travel through time as well as space. And according to Richard Alan Miller, there are also many people who've been traveling through time. They are trapped because they do not know how to get back to their own time period. And therefore, they are what we would call lost in space, but it's lost in the universe. I always think back to Professor Haim Eshed, who said that the Galactic Federation are essentially waiting for us to reach a stage where we will understand what space and spaceships are. Well, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, and a thought popped into my head that maybe we are the spacecraft. We access the universe through our mind, then essentially the being projecting their own thoughts, consciousness, DNA onto their electromagnetic energy field, enabling them to move through time and space using their own electromagnetic energy field, their own light, if you like. The Indian Vedas tell us that there are 400,000 humanoid species in this galaxy alone. But what's a galaxy? And if we think about humanoid species, what's the one thing that we all have in common? We all share human DNA. So if we are able to move through the universe with our shared human DNA, then maybe our DNA has the answers. And here we have some images of Three-Eye Atlas here. This is the disappearing plane that disappeared, and three lights flashing around it as it disappeared, possibly moving it into another dimension of time and space. We have here the strange cloud formations that are appearing all over our world, and nobody quite knows why. They're all so bizarre these days. And here again, we have another Three-Eye Atlas coming in with light codes as well as it moves through the solar system. We talked about the Montauk experiments last week, but I wanted to come back to them again because they really are, I think, showing us how the mind is doing everything, how it's the mind that's multidimensional. And that doesn't mean that what we see around us isn't real. It means that the reality that we live in is multidimensional. And I think the ancient Egyptians showed us that when we talked about last week, show us that working with the cosmic energies, they do action changes. In the work of Dr. Ibrahim Karim, which we looked at last week, that he discovered these same spiritual energies on Earth. So the same places mirroring each other. And we can see that this is higher frequency energy. But he also discovered these same energies under the Earth as well. And the inner Earth water, underground water, is far more high vibrational, higher frequency than our surface water, again, showing us physical proof. In the Montauk experiments, in the initial experiments, they used a child who had very high psychic abilities. And they essentially got this child to sit in this Montauk chair. But what's so interesting about this chair is it didn't have wiring coming off it. So it wasn't that the brain was being hooked up to the chair, it was the mind driving the chair. So again, the mind, consciousness. And as this child was sitting in the chair, they unintentionally materialized what looked like a Sasquatch into physicality, materialized it from nowhere. And then this Sasquatch essentially rampaged around the entire underground bunker. Now, we could say that either this child had manifested this being from their own mind, like egregores or thought forms, or we could take that one step further and consider that if we live in a multidimensional field, then maybe pulling it in from their own mind is the same thing as pulling it in from another dimension. Because quantum physicists can do this as well. They work in other dimensions of time and space, and then essentially can materialize their experiments into physical sight. So are we manifesting it from our own mind? Or is it that the quantum field holds everything? Everything exists in the quantum field, as we're always being told. And if we take this one step further, if we can materialize and pull creatures in from another dimension, then could this be how spacecraft work? Essentially dipping in and out of dimensions, using the power of their own consciousness to alter the holographic field, essentially zipping through dimensions. And if we think about our DNA, which is more akin to traveling through portals than long distance through space, then we are portals. We are portals traveling through dimensions using our own electromagnetic energy field to do that. As we are just beginning to start exploring the field of consciousness, I do feel that other species thousands of years ahead of us have already figured this out. I also feel that we could do this before, and something happened to stop us from doing it. But we're now moving back into a time period where we are going to be able to start doing this again. But we have to work on raising our own internal vibration, connecting ourselves back to our heart, because I think that that is what this next chapter of humanity is all about. It's linking our heart to our brain. We can see that our mind is very powerful. It can move through time and space. It can move through the universe. But without the heart, it's possibly going to cause a lot of damage. Through our emotions and the changes in chromosome 2, we are connected to the higher realms. We are connected to the higher realms of the universe, the multiverse. But we have been connected to the lower realms, the lower dimensions, because we stopped using our heart. And I suspect that that is something that has actually been actively pushed in our world by certain groups of people who do not want us to move through time and space, to understand the true power of our mind and our bodies and our DNA. And one of the things that we can see within our own DNA is the junk DNA switching back on. And as I said the last couple of weeks, the geneticists can see that this is happening. And what exactly is happening? Our junk DNA is possibly our epigenetic memory. So as our junk DNA switches on, more and more of us are remembering the different life forms, different lifetimes that we've had. We're remembering past lives, remembering things that we were able to do. And we're remembering life in other worlds, other realms as well. Again, the quantum physicist Richard Alan Miller talks about how there are many different life forms, carbon-based, as we know we're carbon-based, but there are also silicon-based and even aluminium-based, according to Miller, as he described the aluminium-based life forms being able to move in a very strange way and self-replicate. So are the lights that we see in the sky actually ETs as well as their craft? Is that what we are seeing here? Because essentially we are also made of light. Is this why the indigenous people say that we come from the stars and we return there when we die? We know that we don't die. So what are we seeing up in the sky? Are the orbs that we see flying around, are they living beings traveling again through space and time in a way that we've forgotten because we got trapped into a time construct? The rainbow body monks and the jaguar body of the Amazon show us that we don't die, that we can just reintegrate back into the field, become energy ourselves. We release our light body, showing that it's not physical, and we become energy. And for anyone who has lost a loved one, we can feel that they are not dead. We can still feel their energy. We can still feel their consciousness. So is this how all of this works? Space, ETs, UFO, craft, all these different things, that it's actually the universe that we're talking about here. And maybe we begin to understand that it is our own bodies that are the spacecraft, and consciousness is the road that we travel on. If it triggers you in any way, it is purely looking at life from a different perspective. The more that we can break free of the chains of this limited world that we've been living in for at least 120 years, the more that we can activate our own consciousness, our own DNA, and move back into this unlimited being, life form. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below, and I look forward to having some discussions around what you think and feel about this. Okay, so that's all for this week, and I look forward to catching up with you next week. All right, take care. Bye.